Okay, so in this tutorial, we'll be covering the second part of the dashboard. However, I've already gone ahead and set up everything that needs setting up over on Wized. It's mainly because the list of the stuff that needs setting up is quite long and the video is going to run forever. So what I'll do is go through the key points of the setup so that way there will be no confusion and we can keep this short and sweet. So first things first, let's take a quick look as to what it is that we're going to be setting up over on Wized. Okay, so for the client, we're going to make sure that we connect the project brief, the proposal, and the contract PDF that we previously prepared. So yeah, we're going to connect these, and when you click on it, it should initiate the download. And then we're going to load up our invoices total for outstanding, overdue, and paid. And then as soon as when the client clicks on view and download invoices, it should load up all the invoices that is specific to the project that we're currently seeing right now. Okay, so before we do that, actually, instead of wellness, I'm going to switch over to Dreamland because, you know, this is the project that we've been working on this whole time. Okay, there we go. Wow, this is taking a while. Okay, I'm going to close this for now. All right, and then we're going to work on setting up the file upload. And then we're going to click on view all files. That loads up all the files. And for the files part of it, we have something really cool, and that is we integrated intersection observer API. So what that means is when you scroll down to the bottom of the page, it loads up the next set of items. So at the moment, when the modal opens up, you only get to see like the first 30 items. And as soon as you reach to the bottom, it loads up the next 20 items instead of 30. So yeah, that's what we currently have. Let me refresh this page to show you that again. So there you go. It loaded up the next item, and that's it. We don't have any more items to load because we have only 50 files in total. Perfect. So with that being said, let's jump over to Wized. All right, just going to make sure if I'm on the right project. Yep, this is the right project. Okay. Now for the data in request, let's cover those first. I've added in a few of them. I've added in load invoices, load files, first 5 only, and then load files all. So let's go through them one by one. So the load invoices here, of course, this request basically gets the item list from Airtable. And then we apply on the filter, we've actually applied a filter to this. So we want to make sure that the project record ID from Airtable is an exact match with the parameter of the project record ID on the browser. So because at the moment, if the client is viewing a certain project, we only want to view invoices relevant to that project only, which is why we've placed this record here. Then if you have, the sort by. So we're sorting this out by auto number field and in the ascending format. And that's pretty much it. Now, before I close this off, let me quickly go into Airtable because we never had the chance to actually check out the invoice table. So on the invoice table, everything is quite straightforward. You put in the invoice name. This is supposed to be you need to manually put this in. And then we have the record ID, which is automatically generated by Airtable. And then we have another auto number field, which is, again, automatically assigned by Airtable. So so basically this is how we control if you would like to render the list and set up the list in an ascending or a descending order. That's completely up to you, however you want to do this. Once you've created your invoice, you want to make sure that you connect this to the appropriate project. And then once that's out of the way, you want to select your status here to see where it's at right now. And then the invoice number, it's just a simple text field This has to be manually inputted here. And then we have the invoice amount, which is a number field. So we put this number in here, and then we create a pretty a formula field that takes this number and then adds a .00 to it. Then we have the due date. So this is manually assigned as well. All right, and then we have the paid date. So this has to be manually assigned as well. So whichever way you handle your payment, you have to make sure that you put in this date. Once this date has been put in, make sure that you update your status accordingly as well. So the PDF over here is basically the PDF for your invoice. So obviously once it has been paid off, you might want to you might want to take off the PDF and replace it with the receipt. So that's generally what I do. You may have a different flow, so feel free to do that as well. Okay, so that's that for PDF, and then we have currency. Now, most of the times I'm handling pounds, but I also do have the option in there for dollars. So if you change this to dollars, make sure that you change all the relevant invoices to dollars as well. So that's that for currency. And then we have due date pretty, and then paid date pretty, and then project record ID. So this is a lookup field. This is a lookup field that is connected to our projects, because once you connect the invoice to the project, we use this lookup field for other purposes inside our data in request. I'm not going to go through as to why that is, because once you actually go through the data in request and see how the setup has been done, it's all going to make sense. But long story short, this is something that we require when we're extracting the invoice details from Airtable. Alrighty, so that's that for invoices. Let's head over back to Wiz. And okay, so invoices is done. Let's move on to load files request. Okay, so for the load files, okay, so this says load files first 5 only. All right, so this is for this over here. So we have this area where we display the files that we have, and this is supposed to display the recent files that has been uploaded. Essentially, the first 5 files of those recent files. So let's see how the setup has been done. Okay, so pretty straightforward stuff. We're getting an item list from client portal from the table called files. And then we have a grid view, and we've also included the same filter as our invoices. We want to make sure that the project record ID matches the project record ID in the cookie. Okay, it's interesting that I've selected cookie instead of parameter. You can also change this to the parameter. This is completely up to you. Wow, that's a long list. Okay. So instead of cookie, we're going to make sure that it's a match with the parameter. Okay, and then we want to apply a limit of 5 records. And that's pretty much it. Now finally, we move on to the load files all data in request. So obviously, as the name suggests, we are going to load up all the files that we have for this record. For this specific project that we have. Again, we are grabbing the entire item list from the Airtable database, and we applied the same filter. Project record ID equals, again, instead of the parameter, the cookie, we're going to apply the parameter here. All right, so we're going to make sure that the project record ID matches up with the URL parameter, and then based on that, we want to display all the files. Now, with that being said, let's check out the files table. All right, so we have a file name formula field, and then we have the auto number formula field. Again, self-explanatory. We then have Airtable generating the record ID for us. Then we have the project record ID. Of course, by now you know this, why we have this record ID. It's because so that we can match the URL parameter with the project record ID. Then we have the project here, and then uploaded by name, which is basically a text of this linked record here. Well, it generates the text of this linked record. And then we have the upload date pretty, and file. Now, if you want, you can interact with all the fields manually straight from Airtable. If you want, you can also have it. You can just not interact with this at all, and you can just instead upload all your files straight from the dashboard. This is completely up to you. There are no restrictions over here. Also, another thing I wanted to point out is that I'm currently using Wized native file upload, and which is why I had to come up with this crazy formula. Again, not generated by me. This has been created by Bard. So Bard is the one helping me out with Airtable formulas. So the reason for this formula is because when Wized uploads the file straight into Airtable, there's like a crazy amount of characters, like 20 characters long, included in the file name, and it doesn't really look that great. So that's what this formula is doing here. So it makes sure that it takes off the first 14 characters from the file name. So that's what, and it comes down to this. So that's what we're seeing here. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Unless you decide to go for a different file upload service, then you may or may not have to adjust your formula. So that's something to keep in mind. So let's jump back into Wized. And that's that for the load files all. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna head over to data out and check out all the data out requests that we're sending. Okay, so on data out, you'll notice that we have two requests, file upload and file upload to Airtable. So if I open up this file upload request, this is basically us telling Wiz that, we want to upload our file to their server. And then we have the input here. So if I open this up, so it's basically this input over here. That's what I've connected this to. Then after the file has been uploaded, we perform a request to upload that file over to Airtable. So that's essentially what happens here. Also, I should let you know that at the time of making this video, there is a current bug where when you upload the file through Wized, it's executed like 10-15 times. So one file upload is going to be uploaded like 15 or 20 times, or it could be more. So yeah, there is that bug happening. So you might want to look out for that. Again, unless you decide to go with a different file uploading service, you just need to plug that in, and I think you should be fine. All right, so with that being said, file upload to Airtable, let's check this out real quick. We just want to make sure that the project is connect. So we want to put in the record ID of the project that this file is associated with, and then the client record, and this is for uploaded by. So we put in your client record, which is coming from the cookie. And then we have the file URL, which is coming from Wized server. And that's that for this. And then let's see what we have here. Okay, so once the file has been uploaded, what happens is we rerun the load files first 5 only request. So let's see what that looks like. So once you upload the file, this list over here is refreshed. It's reloaded, and so let's see that in action and see what that looks like. So I'm going to upload this file here. All right, so we got this weird name here. Well, that's actually the actual name of the file, so that's fine. So we're going to close that. Well, actually, you should have seen you should be seeing the first 5. I'm not sure why it's setting up that way. Let's refresh this. Okay, let me just adjust this real quick. Okay, so I did find the issue to our little problem here, and that is my bad. That's completely my fault here. So in the data in, if I go to the load files data in request. Oh, right, sorry. So basically the data out, file upload. Okay, so this is where I've actually made a mistake. On the file upload to Airtable, so the project record ID needs to be coming from the parameter and not the cookie. So something to keep in mind is that you actually might want to avoid the cookie entirely. So I changed what I'm contradicting myself here. I did say that, oh, it's fine if you were to select the cookie. When you're sending in the record ID, it's best, the project record ID, it's best to grab that from the URL parameter as opposed to the cookie. Because if you notice here, we have the Dreamland. If I go to the page data here, you'll notice that the parameter project record ID is FFS, but our project record ID cookie is 93J, which is a different project, which is basically this one right here, Wellness Wave. So when I uploaded my file, it actually assigned this file to the other project as opposed to this project here. So that's where I went wrong. I do apologize. But yeah, this is something that you might want to be mindful about and make sure that you assign the parameter project record ID and not the cookie. Okay, now with that being said, let's quickly go through our actions. So for context, these are all the actions for the second part of the dashboard. Okay, so let's cover the documents. I believe we haven't covered that yet. So the document is getting its project brief PDF, the proposal brief PDF, the proposal PDF, and the contract PDF from the projects table. So there we go. We have the project brief PDF, the proposal PDF, and the contract PDF. That's coming straight from our projects table. So yeah, we are setting the HTML attribute of ref. So this is us linking the link to this. And then we also add another HTML attribute of download to the link block. So as soon as you click on it, we initiate the download. So let's look at that. I've clicked on it. It takes a while when you're in the Wized preview. It takes a while for the download to show up. Okay, anyway, we'll just leave it as it is. Actually, let me just check if it shows up on the preview. Ah, there we go. Eventually, it always shows up. Let's click on proposal. Okay, it's weird. The proposal didn't work. Let's see if we have set this properly. Okay, proposal is working. Let's click on the other one as well. All right, still waiting for the contract, but nothing's happening. Okay, we'll just wait for it to load up. Oh, there we go. So it is working. I'm not sure why it's so slow in doing it, but oh, there we go. That's the second click right there. Okay. Now, in case if you didn't know, we've also applied the same download attribute to our invoices here as well. We've applied this to all our files, and if you click on view all files and wait for it to load up, all right, we've also applied it to all of these as well. Now, I'm not going to walk through our actions because all the actions are actually super straightforward. It's just mainly us. It's just a repetition of what we've covered everything so far, you know, assigning, grabbing the value from the field, from Airtable, and then assigning that value to our element here, then setting the visibility of a loader and assigning the URL of a link block, and that's pretty much it. So I'm going to be moving all of these into the dashboard folder right after I wrap up on the tutorial. Okay, so that is that for the actions panel. Now finally, let's move on to our custom code. So, okay, now I've added extra bit of code to our dashboard JavaScript file. So we're gonna walk through this now, and I'm going to explain what exactly is happening. So, okay, now we have a onload function here, and we are creating 3 different variables on this first part of the code. And basically what's happening is that, remember the observer, intersection observer API that I mentioned? So what we're doing is that when you click on view all files, it runs the request, and the array of all the files are basically stored in a JavaScript variable. And then the intersection observer API actually is the one that renders that list, and not Wized. Wized isn't rendering the list. It renders the list originally, but then observer API grabs that data and then loads up the first 30 items, and then it goes on, so on and so forth. So that's essentially what this code is doing here. So firstly, we have the loaded item count, which is set to default as 0, and then it has a all files variable, which is an empty array, and then there's this loading variable, which is set to false. I'm not quite sure what that is about. All right, and then we have this bit of code. So what this does is, so this variable over here that has all files variable, so inside this array we store the data of this specific request, load files all. So we store this array of information that you see here, R17D. So that's what it's being stored in this empty array as an object. So when you click on the close, so the moment you click on close, that variable is set to an empty array. So we reset this. So again, when you click on view all files, it reloads all over again. I had a bug previously, so apparently the fix for it was resetting the array. So that's essentially what it's doing here. Okay, so moving on, then we have get all elements with load files equals to reset. Okay, so this is exactly what I've just explained right now, but let me show you in WEBFLOW which element actually has this attribute. Okay, so we have the files pop-up wrapper, and this is the button. Actually, well, close pop-up link block is the one that has this attribute called load files reset. So if I go over here, this is the one that initiates the reset. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to close this. All right, and then we have our load first 30 files on page load and create an intersection observer to load more files when the end of the list is reached. So yeah, it waits for the load files all request to be executed, and then once it's executed, it grabs all the data from R17D, like I've mentioned, and then it stores all that in the all files. We also have a Wized variable called all files. So let me actually show you what that is. So if I go to page data, and we have this variable called all files. So let me show you where we're load files all. Okay. Yeah, it's so yeah, we've created a variable, and basically once we have grabbed all the data from the load files all request, we store that data inside of all files variable. And when we store that data, we store that array in all files variable, and then the observer intersection API grabs that from this variable here. I know it sounds really confusing, but hopefully it does make sense. Okay, and then we have the load more query selector and the wrapper selector. Okay, so let me head back to WEBFLOW and open up the files pop-up wrapper again. So if you look at the navigator panel here, you'll notice that there is this empty block, this div called empty block. And if I open up the settings cog, you'll notice that it has an ID of load more. So essentially what happens is when empty block comes into view, that's when Observer API knows that it needs to load up the next set of items. So that's essentially what's happening here. Okay, and scrolling down, we have a continuation of, you know, storing the array of the stuff from the request. And yeah, this is where we set the number of items that we want to load up. So you can change this if you want to. You can increase it or decrease this. I wanted to put this as 10 every time it loaded up new items, but 20 seemed pretty good. And that's that for the observer intersection observer API. And then this part of the code is, of course, the URL parameter from our last video that we addressed. And that is that for the code side of things. And also lastly, I wanted to point out this little documentation that I found on Medium. I didn't find this on Medium. Elvis from customer support, Wized customer support, was kind enough to share this with me. That really helped me implement this functionality on Wized. So I'm going to include this in the description so that you can check it out as well. So yeah, that's a wrap for this tutorial. If you have any questions, then please do leave them in the comments and I will get to those as soon as possible. Till then, I will catch you in the next one.